Historic voter turnout brought big wins for Texas Republicans, but now that Election Day is over, what's important is what's next.
Anyone who thinks that education is going to get out of this session totally unscathed, I think you're dreaming.
How will the people you elected find funding for public schools and public safety? We're looking closer at the response to the challenges ahead. Plus, a power play at the Capitol, one day after the election.
The race is over, and the work of the 150 members coming together to serve Texas begins today.
How a lawmaker moved to take one of the most powerful positions in state government and why that move matters. Hello, and thank you for joining us for State of Texas. I'm Josh Hinkle. Election Day brought big victories for Texas Republicans and disappointment for Texas Democrats. Donald Trump beat Joe Biden by more than 5 percentage points. More than 5.8 million Texans voted for Trump. John Cornyn earned more than 5.9 million votes to win the U.S. Senate race. He beat Democrat M.J. Hagar by nearly 10 percentage points. After the win, Cornyn called for unity.
Whether I earned your vote or whether you were pulling for my opponent, I'm honored and committed to serving and representing all Texans.
The victory means Cornyn will return to Washington to serve his 4th term in the Senate. Texas Republicans also held on to every one of their seats in Congress. One big win came in District 23. Democrats hope to win that seat after incumbent Republican Will Hurd announced he would not run for re-election. But Republicans held the seat with Navy veteran Tony Gonzalez beating Democratic challenger Gina Ortiz-Jones. That district stretches from San Antonio west to the outskirts of El Paso as well as south to the border. In several South Texas border counties, which are predominantly Latino, former Vice President Joe Biden won by slimmer margins than Hillary Clinton did in 2016 on his way to losing Texas. Here's a look. Biden won Webb, Hidalgo, Cameron, and El Paso counties, but he won by a smaller percentage than Clinton did in 2016. Texas Republican Party Chair Alan West told us he believes that's because Trump has resonated with minority voters.
I think that the Hispanic community and as well as the Black community connected with President Trump based upon his principles and values. The fact that they saw the lowest unemployment numbers in the Hispanic and Black communities on record. I think also when you talk about strength of family, Judeo-Christian faith heritage, small business entrepreneurship, those are the means by which we were able to connect with the people down there in the Rio Grande Valley.
It's also important to note both Republicans and Democrats increased their vote totals in those counties. Ed Espinoza of Progress Texas believes Biden didn't lose Latino voters, but rather lost rural voters.
And these Latino communities, while they're heavily Latino counties, they are also heavily rural counties. And around Texas, Donald Trump picked up 400,000 more votes from the rural parts of Texas than he did 4 years ago. So it makes sense that he very well could have brought out new rural voters in these communities.
Democrats also failed to gain any ground in the Texas House. The party flipped one seat, but they lost one as well. So the balance of power will likely be where it was in the last session. Republicans hold a 16-seat majority in the 150-member House. Failure to gain seats will likely have long-term impact. Democrats will not have as much influence as they expected when it comes to redrawing the district lines for Congress and the state legislature. It also hurts their efforts to increase access to health care and expand voting rights. Texas Democrats did get one win that has potential to affect the balance of power in the state Senate. It happened in District 19, where State Representative Roland Gutierrez defeated incumbent Republican Pete Flores. The win means Democrats will hold 13 of the 31 seats in the Texas Senate. Republicans will have 18 seats. That could be a big deal because right now Senate rules require 19 votes to pass legislation. We say right now because it could change. Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick leads the Senate. Earlier this year, Patrick said he would push to change the rule and require fewer votes to push legislation through. Overall, Texas Republicans maintained their grip on power, and that brings big responsibility. Lawmakers must find a way to maintain historic funding for public schools, as the state faces serious financial pressure from the coronavirus pandemic. Politics reporter John Engel finds out where those cuts could be felt and the impact on your child's education.
The financial stress is a real thing.
Jane Cerna has been in classrooms for 31 years. She says the roller coaster of a teacher's salary has a direct impact on their mental health and the classroom.
There's a point at which it doesn't make sense to keep teaching.
The Texas legislature has to figure out how to pay for a $2 billion increase in public school funding that they approved in 2019. That included pay raises for teachers, but has no permanent funding source. It's tied to a budget surplus that vanished during the pandemic.
We have to make good on that promise.
State Representative Gary Van Dever is a former school administrator. He says raises and incentives for teachers may need to be paused as the state recovers.
Anyone who thinks that education is going to get out of this session totally unscathed, I think you're dreaming.
Van Dever knows that Republicans like himself holding all the power will be on the hook to find a solution.
Whatever happens will be because they chose for that to be the case.
Some districts like Austin ISD gave raises, others stuck with bonuses, unsure of where that money would come from in the future. For teachers, the roller coaster continues.
I think there's hope. I do. But what I worry about is that that won't happen quickly enough for people who have to make a decision in the next year or two. Do I stay in the profession?
For State of Texas, I'm John Engel.
You heard briefly there from Representative Gary Van Dever. The East Texas Republican is a former school superintendent. He now serves on both the Public Education and Appropriations Committees. Here's more of John Engel's interview with Representative Van Dever, giving deeper insight into the challenges facing lawmakers when it comes to school funding.
I want to know where your head is at going into this session. One thing that you think this legislature needs to achieve in terms of public ed.
Well, I think first and foremost, I think we have to achieve meeting our obligation, meeting our promise that we made in House Bill 3 when it comes to teacher pay and funding of our public schools. As a former school administrator, the worst thing that can happen to a school, in my opinion, is the yo-yo effect. We fund you this biennium, we take it back next biennium, and then we give it back the next biennium. And schools need to plan just like the state needs to plan. And a school can't plan if they can't depend on the revenue to be there. So it's very important that we not pull any of that back, at least nothing substantial that would harm programs. So I think that is our first commitment. I hope we will work on the accountability part, the testing part, all those things are important. But I just believe the elephant in the room is going to be the funding and trying to fully fund House Bill 3.
Do you think that House Bill 3 will be fully funded next session?
I think for the most part, it will be fully funded. There may be some things that I've suggested maybe the teacher incentive allotment. Let's press the pause button on that. I don't know if that's viable or not, but I know a lot of schools in my area have postponed implementation of that. It's not fully implemented across the state. I know it is implemented in some situations, and I'm not suggesting we pull money back from someone who has already been awarded that allotment, but things like that maybe are not fully implemented at this point. I'm not saying let's do away with them. I'm saying let's press pause button, push it out 2 more years, buy some time to allow the economy to come back. I believe when the economy comes back, it's going to come back roaring. We had a sound economy before the pandemic hit. So I think if we can get past the pandemic, I think the economy will come back much more quickly than it does maybe in some other situations.
The electorate sent a clear message in Texas that Republican leadership is here to stay, and that Republicans are the ones that have been entrusted right now in this moment to guide the state. And with that mandate comes a huge responsibility to meet those promises that you mentioned on public education. How much does that weigh on you, and how much do you think it should weigh on the caucus that, look, we got the trust, we campaigned on saying we raised teachers' pay and we gave money to schools. What are we going to do to make it pay off on the back end?
Absolutely. There is a huge responsibility that goes with that. And you're right. I mean, I think we saw a mandate yesterday. We take it as that in the Republican caucus that overall the state has endorsed the leadership, at least for now. And so we have to step up and lead. And I think we have in the past. I think that's why we have House Bill 3 and similar legislation. We have made the commitment to our public schools, and a lot of my colleagues ran on that, were elected on that, were reelected on that, and we have to make good on that promise. And I think we will. I really do. you said we are, as you said, we are somewhat bipartisan. We get along. We go eat dinner and socialize with people from across the aisle, and that's very true. And I truly believe that to a member, I don't believe there's anyone in the legislature who would want to do anything to truly harm the students and the teachers in our public schools in Texas today. And so it's just a matter of coming to some agreement as to what is the best path forward. What can we do to best help them while we are, good stewards of the resources we have in the state, or lack thereof. And so it's a challenge, but I believe everyone is an honest player, and we will make the best decision.
While the state faces a budget shortfall, some agencies are asking for more money. We'll look at why some pleas for more money could lead to action from state lawmakers. The outcome of Tuesday's election opened a path to power for one representative.
I am humbled and honored that I have the support to be the next speaker.
How a lawmaker moved to take one of the most powerful positions in state government and why that move matters.